what are the next things that are going to be attacked? Because this MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history.
Now, at the same time, he's always believed in working with Republicans in good faith.
Inflation is much too high.
Hyperbole has reached its peak. Yesterday, Joe Biden called MAGA the most extremist group in American history, or at least recent American history. Jen Psaki in the same day said Joe Biden is open to working with Republicans. Inflation is too high. The Fed is raising the interest rate, and also the CDC tracked your phones during COVID. More dismal stuff. All that and more coming up on this episode of Daily Caller Live. Daily Caller Live starts right now.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go.
That might be the only brown guy on earth named Jobob.
That is actually her name, Jobob.
Live from the dingy bunker, completely cut off from the outside world, except for you fine folks. My name is Jobob. This is Daily Caller Live. Thanks so much for tuning in on today. It is May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. I'll probably get in trouble for that. I don't even know what I was talking about. The CDC tracked people all throughout the country during COVID, so there was that. We're finding that out now from the Freedom of Information Act via Vice. Also, inflation is too high, and the Federal Reserve is pumping up the interest rates to stomp that, so that's not good. Well, it's good. It has to happen, but we'll talk about that more in a second. But I wanted to get to the extreme hyperbole, which just for anybody who's going to shoot in the comment section, hey, that's redundant or whatever. Yeah, I'm aware. I'm aware that using the title extreme hyperbole, one, is hilarious, and two, is, I don't know, kind of an oxymoron in and of itself. But the Biden administration is engaging in extreme hyperbole surrounding this Roe versus Wade thing, and also Democrats as a whole are engaging in extreme hyperbole. Over the topness has never been so over the top. Jen Psaki yesterday in the White House press briefing room said, here's like a little 10-second clip I'm going to play you. And then on the same day, the President of the United States said what he said. If you missed this clip, if you haven't seen this clip, it's interesting. If you haven't already, click the little like button, click the little share button. Again, there's multiple times more people watching this than they have clicked the little like button. Or if you're on Twitter, the retweet button. It really, really helps us out. Really appreciate you doing that. Listen to this from Jen Psaki of the White House press briefing room, in the White House press briefing room yesterday. Really short clip. Watch this.
Now, at the same time, he's always believed that in working with Republicans in good faith and finding ways to do that. And he will continue to do that.
Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, has always believed in working with Republicans in good faith. That means not calling them extremists, because that would be an absurd thing to do if you want to work with the other side of the aisle in quote-unquote good faith. Now let's listen to the president from yesterday, also same day that Jen Psaki said that, talking about the MAGA movement. Watch this from the president.
Well, that got struck down. Griswold was thought to be a bad decision by Bork, and my guess is the guy's on the Supreme Court now. What happens if you have a state changes the law saying that children who are LGBTQ can't be in classrooms with other children? Is that legit under the way that the decision is written? What are the next things that are going to be attacked? Because this MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history.
If I know anything about good faith, it's calling the people that you're trying to work with in good faith the most extreme group in American history. Now, he did say the video that I got cut off, he did say in recent history. So we'll give him that caveat, because the first time I heard this, he said, in American history, like, okay, wait a minute. So we're also including the KKK and the Black Panthers in that? Like, dude. But even then, in modern American history, you've got to include BLM in there. So, okay, last time I haven't seen the MAGA groups burning down cities. So there's that. I guess I don't know what qualifies as extremist in his mind. In my mind, it would be setting fire to buildings and running down the streets as if the law is not a real thing. But what do I know? There's another part in there that I think is hilarious in the sense that the hyperbole has reached peak level over the topness in terms of how they're relating this Roe versus Wade decision to other things around the country. I think he said something along the lines in this video. Maybe we'll replay it. Well, what's next? Does this mean LGBTQ2 plus IA kids? He didn't use the entire acronym. I did. I am inclusive. Does it mean that those kids are going to be not allowed to do what? I don't know what he said, and I'm too lazy to replay the video. But they're extrapolating this Roe versus Wade decision into, oh no, now people aren't going to be able to do X, Y, Z. He said not yesterday, 2 days ago, well, what does that mean that Florida is going to ban gay marriage? Does that mean Brown versus Board of Education is going to get overturned? No. Next question, Mr. President. Thank you for asking. But no, those are not even close to being the same thing as what Roe versus Wade is doing. It is giving power back to the states. And then also Alito, in that opinion, not to get mired down in that, expressed concern over the specific abortion issue. I've been saying for a long time that Roe versus Wade is bad case law because it took more power from the states and moved it to the federal government, which is exactly the opposite of what the Constitution says it should do. That's why it's bad case law outside of abortion. But I believe Alito alluded to heavily that no, this is about abortion specifically, which is fine. He's allowed to do that. He's allowed to have that opinion. But what I'm getting at here is the extrapolation by the left or the Democratic Party or Joe Biden specifically has become over the topness. If over the top had a bigger brother and that over the topness had a grandpa, that's what the over the topness of the current push by the left is. I'm not entirely sure if that made sense. What I'm getting at here is the extreme extrapolation of what's being done in regards to how they think this is going to affect the rest of the country. I wanted to get to this because I think this is as big as it gets. I have to believe this tweet from a sitting U.S. Congressman, Eric Swalwell, is the most extreme of the extreme. Let me blow this up bigger for you who are watching this, but I'll read it. This is a sitting U.S. Congressman, Eric Swalwell, ran for president. Fang Fang, remember Fang Fang? Eric Swalwell's friend? Gosh dang it. I feel like I bring things up and I don't explain them. Eric Swalwell was dating a Chinese spy, and her name was Fang Fang. We won't get into that right now. But Eric Swalwell, sitting U.S. Democrat congressman, said the Republicans won't stop with banning abortion. They want to ban interracial marriage. Do you want to save that? Well, then you should probably vote. Okay. Again, this is a sitting U.S. congressman saying that because of Roe versus Wade, because the right-wing victory of Roe versus Wade, Republicans are then going to move to ban interracial marriages. I don't really even know how to react to this. I feel like this is so absurd that it's funny on so many different levels, but the fact that some people might actually believe him is a problem. Actually, you know what? Here's where I stand. Thank goodness the Biden administration has put forth a disinformation committee to tamp down Congress people saying ridiculous nonsense like this. Thank goodness that disinformation board is in place, because surely they'll go after Eric Swalwell for saying something that is as insane as the thing that he said. I want to leave this on the screen as much as possible, but we have to move on to other things that are probably more important-ish. You know what? Actually, let's get into this first. The CDC was tracking you. If you haven't heard this story, you should, because it affects everybody, and I feel like there are some massive problems here. I want to talk about this first before inflation, because inflation is a less sexy topic. And not that this topic is going to make people excited by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like it is massively important to the functionality of the CDC and one Dr. Fauci, who doesn't believe the CCC should be, the CDC, I almost said the CCP. Similar type of thing, I guess, apparently. They both track people on their phones. They're both semi-tyrannical in their approach. But I feel like this is things that people should know. If you're not familiar with this story, Vice had a story late 2 days ago. We talked about it yesterday on some of the shows. I didn't bring it on here because we're covering the meltdown over the Roe versus Wade thing. But this is from Vice News. Newly released documents show the CDC plans to use phone location data to monitor schools, churches, and wanted to use the data for non-CDC purposes, as well as the CDC tracking millions of phones to see if Americans followed COVID lockdown orders. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention bought access to location data harvested from tens of millions of phones in the United States to perform analysis of compliance with curfews, track patterns of people visiting K-12 schools, and specifically monitor the effectiveness of the policies in the Navajo Nation. So that's weird on its face. According to CDC documents obtained by Motherboard is a podcast, I believe, powered by Vice News. The documents show that although the CDC used COVID-19 as a reason to buy access to the data more quickly, it intended to use it for more general CDC purposes. Wow, I wonder if that's the actual story. So the big story, or that everybody's been talking about, is the CDC's been tracking people on their phones. Let me get down a little bit further in this article. Shoot, did I not copy and paste that? Basically, the CDC spent $450,000 for a year of access to cell phone geolocation tracking from a company that provides that sort of thing. So they bought data, so they didn't do it themselves, which I guess some people that are proponents of this are saying that makes it different for some reason. But the CDC themselves bought data from a cell phone geo-tracking company for a year to use, and then tracked people all throughout the country to see whether or not they adhered to the COVID curfew policies and the lockdown policies that were issued by the states and by the federal government in some way, shape, or form. Well, here's something, CDC. I would have just told you that no, I wasn't following any of your ridiculous instructions / curfews / guidelines. The documents contain a long list of what the CDC describes as 21 different potential CDC uses for the cases of the data. So maybe this is the big story, that they planned to use it for more things. Just so you know, this was obtained by a Freedom of Information request with the CDC. They include tracking the patterns of those visiting K-12 schools by the schools and compared to 2019, compared with the EPI metrics, if possible. So they were wanting to track people whether or not they were going to schools. Examinations of the correlations of mobility patterns, data, and rise of CDC cases, movement restrictions, border closures, international foreign relations, etc., to show compliance. A government entity was tracking American cell phones to see if they showed compliance. Does that worry the heck out of anybody? Examination of the effectiveness of public policy on specifically the Navajo Nation. That's weird. Not entirely sure what they picked them to track and pick on, but that's the case. Bottom lining it here, the CDC spent $500,000 buying data to track the American people, and then was considering using that data for a longer period of time to track other things that they thought might be beneficial, or to see how many people complied with their ridiculous nonsense laws. I mean, that's pretty much that. We'll leave that there. If there's anything new that develops out of that, I feel like we'll bring it on. And I want to get to this before we run out of time here, is this massive money problems that the United States is going to have. I understand that this is not the most sexy topic to talk about, but I'm going to try and break down this idea of stagflation for people who are unaware with that term and unaware of the ramifications of stagflation and how it could be how it's disastrous. Starts with this. The Federal Reserve Board Chair, Jerome Powell, went out in front of the microphones and talked directly to the American people yesterday when the Federal Reserve usually tamped down, raised the interest rate at the Federal Reserve again, as they are going to do time and time again over the course of the next year. Watch this brief clip from the Federal Reserve Chair talking about inflation and raising interest rates.
Before I go into the details of today's meeting, I'd like to take this opportunity to speak directly to the American people. Inflation is much too high, and we understand the hardship it is causing, and we're moving expeditiously to bring it back down. We have both the tools we need and the resolve that it will take to restore price stability on behalf of American families and businesses. The economy and the country have been through a lot over the past 2 years and have proved resilient. It is essential that we bring inflation down if we are to have a sustained period of strong labor market conditions that benefit all.
Okay, so that was Jerome Powell basically saying that the Federal Reserve has the tools that it needs to get inflation back down to a reasonable level. Now, you want inflation. The Federal Reserve's entire job is to keep inflation at like 1.5% to 2%. That's their entire reason for existence. Inflation is at like what, 8%, 8.5%? I think it went down a little bit to inflation rate is still rising at like 6.5%. Still way, way over the 2%, 1.5% mark that they're aiming for consistently. When inflation is high, you want to restrict the amount of money being put out by the Federal Reserve or being borrowed by the Federal Reserve. That's why you increase interest rates. When you increase interest rates, people start borrowing less and there's less money in circulation, which means that inflation rates hopefully go down. When interest rates are low, people are encouraged to borrow money and you get the economy moving. People are doing things. Movers and shakers are spending money and taking out loans and doing projects and building things, and it's great. But when there's too much money in the system, as we see right now, inflation explodes, right? So you want to tamp down interest rates in order to keep inflation down. Here's the problem. Generally speaking, when inflation is high, the economy is also booming because there's more money flowing around. And like I said, movers and shakers are doing things and everything is all good. The problem with the last GDP numbers that came out of the federal government is that the GDP is actually shrinking, and it has shrunk for the first time in a long time in the last most recent quarter. Now, when you have 2 consecutive quarters of GDP shrinkage, GDP, the economy as a whole contracting, that's when you have a recession. A recession is not a good thing because the economy is doing less than what it was. It is a smaller pie than what it used to be, which is not good. You always want to be expanding when it comes to economic growth and GDP. The issue generally is, or not the issue generally is, but what generally happens is when the GDP is expanding, the economy is expanding, that's when you have high inflation. It is not often that you have high inflation and also a shrinking economy. The problem with that is that the Federal Reserve bringing up interest rates in order to combat inflation is also going to make the GDP shrink more and the economy shrink more as a whole. There's going to be less borrowing, less movers and shakers doing their moving and shaking, and more contraction of the American economy. This is called stagflation. Stagflation is worse than deflation and worse than inflation because not only is there less money around in circulation, the economy is also shrinking. And inflation is continuing to be on the rise because of the amount of money that's in the system. I understand that that's not the most, I always use the word sexy. It's not the most sexy topic to talk about, but it is massively necessary for the American people to understand what is about to happen. The Federal Reserve needs to raise interest rates a ton. At the end of a two-day meeting on Wednesday, it notched the largest increase in 20 years. The Federal Reserve is behind the curve. This is interesting, said Greg McBride, a chief financial analyst at Bankrate. They have to raise interest rates a lot and in a hurry. This is, again, to tamp down inflation, which is going to shrink the economy even more. I believe this is from CNBC. The Federal Reserve raised target federal funds by 0.5 point at the end of the two-day meeting on Wednesday, just notching the largest increase in benchmarks in 20 years. Federal Chairman Jerome Powell on Thursday said the central bank is committed to raising rates expeditiously to bring down inflation. Again, probably going to cause a recession, just so you're all aware. That could mean an interest rate hike of 50 basis points in May as prices rise at their fastest pace in more than 40 years. That's inflation. It's absolutely essential to restore price stability, Jerome Powell added. So, I'm not a financial advisor. I don't know what you should do in here. I'm just trying to prepare you for what's coming. There's going to be less money in circulation. Loan rates are going to be higher. Maybe that'll tamp down the housing market. But at the same time, then we got to compete with big investors and big hedge fund companies like BlackRock and Vanguard who are buying up all the residential homes. That's a whole other issue for another time because we can't get down that rabbit hole right now. But maybe this will stop inflation, but at the same time, it has a huge likelihood of collapsing the economy even more and making it harder for businesses to do their thing because it's more difficult and more expensive to get loans at a reasonable rate. Bruce says, love your shirt. It's the Let's Go Brandon shirt. It's available on my Instagram store. Thanks, Bruce. Trying to lighten the mood here. Appreciate it. That's going to do it for us today. Dang it, I feel like we're ending on a downer. I think it's funny because I was speaking at an event this past weekend. Said, I try to put more of a lighthearted comedic spin on things. And I feel like the last couple days, especially last week when we ended on that, the child drag show that Discovery's now doing, that was bad. That was pretty dismal. So sorry for doing that to you. But to end that on kind of a downer note, it's just, I don't know. That's be prepared, Americans. Start growing food in your backyard if you can. That's going to do it for us today. If you haven't already, give me a follow on any of your social media platforms. Just JOBOB. It's where you can find my Let's Go Brandon t-shirt along with my What Joe Biden t-shirts that I wear constantly on this show. You can find them anywhere on my social media accounts. You can buy them in the Facebook shop, the Instagram shop, and then Twitter will give you a link. That's it. That's going to do it for us today. We'll see you tomorrow on a Friday, hopefully having a lighter day because the news will probably be a little bit lighter, and maybe we can send you off in the weekend and some funness. Maybe we'll get a lot of the Libs of TikTok stuff on Friday, on tomorrow, and make it a little more lighthearted, at least laughing a little bit. We will see you tomorrow. God bless America.